Professor Geoff Roberts is an historian and a renowned specialist in Russian and Soviet foreign and military policy, and an expert on Stalin and the Second World War. I think, that was quite a heated discussion. Considering, I was going to ask this question anyway, I think most people think that Ukraine, making moves to join NATO has played a role in the current conflict. I think most people agree, perhaps not the AWL, but I think most other people think that this has certainly played a huge role in the invasion. Doesn't mean we, think the invasion is a good idea or defend, war crimes that are being committed, etc. But starting from this, how do you view the prospect of Sweden and Finland making moves to join NATO? I mean, what can possibly go wrong there?
Thanks, Tina. I'm a historian and an academic, so I see my main role in this debate is to inform the debate, to sort of lend my expertise to debate rather than to take sides. I'm listening to the debate. I thought both the speakers made some valid points. So I don't really want to take side in that debate. But having said that, I do have a position on the war. So let's full disclosure here. So a few days after the war, myself and a number of Russian studies specialists issued a statement in the form of a position. And this group, there were 7 of us, would probably be viewed by a lot of people, some people, anyway, maybe a lot of people, as being, if not, supporters of the Putin regime, at least sympathetic to the Russian point of view in relation to security questions. So that's the kind of group it was. But the statement we issued was a statement against the invasion, calling for an immediate ceasefire, calling for a peace settlement. We described the war as a war of choice by Putin. It's Putin's war, and he's the one who bears the main responsibility for the war. So that was our position. But what we also said in this statement, we also said that NATO and the West could have maybe helped avoid this war by doing some kind of security deal with the Russians. The Ukrainian government could have averted war by implementing the Minsk agreement. So so obviously this was an invasion, an aggressive, a war of aggression. It's the Russian government and Putin's responsibility, but there's plenty of blame to be shared around here. But having said that, it's important to understand what Putin's motivations are here if we're going to see a way through what's going to happen, because from his point of view, and from the point of view of the Russian military political elite, from probably most people in Russia, the war in Ukraine is a defensive war. It was a war that was launched to stop the expansion of NATO. It was launched to stop Ukraine becoming an armed camp, a de facto member of NATO. It's a preventative war that Putin thinks he had to fight now because he was going to have to fight this war sooner or later. So that's his perspective. I'm not saying that perspective is right or I agree with that rationalization or that's an excuse. No, there was the only justification for war is necessity, and I do not think that this was and is a necessary war. Now, as far as the question you asked me about, Sweden and Finland, I lived in Finland for a year, so I know a bit about the country and its history. And I think it would be an absolute disaster if Sweden and Finland should join NATO. I really hope they don't, because it will actually escalate the situation further. I mean, the Swedes and Finns, okay, from their perspective, they see a threat to their security position, to their position, arising out of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and that's understandable. But actually, I don't think there is an actual threat from Russia to either Finland and Sweden. But by joining NATO, they're actually going to create that threat, because once they do that, then they are going to be perceived by the Russians as being a threat to them. So it'd be a further escalation, a further intensification of a very, very dangerous confrontation that's developed in relation to this Ukrainian war.
That's what it looked like to me, I'm afraid. Yes, thank you for clarifying that. And how likely do you think this is actually, I mean, apparently in Russia, this is already being fought as World War III, and that's how Putin is defending it to the Russian people. But, you know, the nuclear dimension is obviously a huge possible threat. I mean, Dmitry Medvedev, sorry, I can't pronounce it, the former president of Russia has already said, you know, that them two countries joining NATO would be seen as a direct threat, and that the country would consider deploying nuclear weapons. Do you think this is likely, or is it more like a threat at this?
Well, he's talking about deploying nuclear weapons in the sense as a counter to NATO's expansion into Finland and Sweden. It's interesting you mention Medvedev. It's because, of course, he would be seen, quite rightly, as being relatively liberal compared to Putin, more amenable to negotiations, compromises with the West. And yet, in this current crisis, he's taken a very, very hard line. Indeed, as hard a line as Putin, and I think that's a kind of reflection of the shift that's occurred in the Putin regime, and among the Russian military, political elite. Very, very severe threat perceptions as far as the West concerned. Intense suspicion. They don't trust the West at all. In fact, not that, even worse than that, they actually don't care. They actually don't care about what the West thinks or what the West is actually going to do, and they're prepared to face the consequences, whatever those consequences are.
Do you think? I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, on both sides, the wading through the propaganda and polling, etc., etc. But what's your estimation of Putin's position and the war? I mean, does it, at the beginning, it wasn't really supported by much of the Russian people. Has that changed together with the sanctions as well? Are they more behind it now?
Well, all the opinion polling data seems to suggest that there's massive popular support for the war in Russia, particularly in the working class, of course. I mean, the opposition to the war would be more of a middle class and an intelligentsia kind of thing, and I think the more the West confronts, this is a generalization, throughout this whole post-Cold War period, the more that the West confronts Russia, takes a hard line in relation to Russia, demonizes Putin, demonizes Russia, promotes Russophobia. The more that happens, the stronger Putin's position gets, the stronger the regime gets. So I have to say, I think this side, well, who knows? I mean, if the war goes very badly, then sure, maybe Putin will step aside, or be forced to step aside, although I doubt that his replacement will be any more amenable to the West than Putin is. That's possible. But this war is strengthening the position of the Putin regime. The best way to actually undermine the Putin regime would actually bring about an end to this war as soon as possible. That could be the start of a process of undermining the Putin regime, not actually prosecuting the war or turning it into a proxy war, or waging an economic war in Russia with a view to regime change. That approach is and will be a complete and absolute disaster, and also very dangerous, of course, very dangerous in terms of escalation.
Absolutely, and we've just heard that Joe Biden is, as opposed to what Pete Ratcliffe was saying. I mean, they're already supplying tons of weapons to the regime in the Ukraine. I mean, over £2 billion dollars worth of weaponry just by the US, just since Joe Biden has been president. UK forces are now on the ground training Ukrainian soldiers. So it is already, there is already huge support for this to extend it ever.
I mean, I think the the issue of weapon supplies is a difficult question, because on the one hand, yeah, Ukraine does have the right to defend itself. It is a victim of aggression, but it seems to me the issue is, what's the purpose of these weapon supplies? If the purpose is to bolster the Ukrainian position so that they can, to strengthen their position in terms of negotiations for a ceasefire and some eventual, peace agreement, then I think there is certainly a case to be made in favour of at least certain types of weapon supplies. But I suppose the other thing about weapon supplies is what weapons and what's happening to these weapons. Because one of the things that seems to happen, this is a very dangerous development, is a lot of these weapons, these small arms, are being distributed to the general population. What's going to happen as a result of that? What's that? That is actually going to you're giving arms to, obviously to patriots and people who want to fight their country, but you're also giving arms or making arms accessible to criminals and neo-Nazi militias. So the unintended consequence of that kind of arming of Ukraine needs to be taken into account.
Thank you very much, Geoff, Professor Roberts. Sorry, and I think that was quite enlightening, and it's not too positive, the outlook at the moment. It's very difficult to see how this could come to an end anytime soon. Thank you for joining us this morning.